So God in eternity past elected to love me in grace. He sent people to preach to me the message of grace, and then he did the most amazing thing. He gave me regenerating grace. Regenerating grace is to me one of the most astonishing, helpful insights that I've ever learned. It's something I've been meditating on all year, last year, and into this year. And regenerating grace is something I'll explain in further detail when we deal with faith and works in a few weeks. I'll read from Ezekiel, and I'll give you a brief summation of one of my favorite doctrines, regenerating grace. Ezekiel 36, 26, and 27, God says this, I will give you a new heart, a new heart. Now by heart, it's not just speaking of the physical organ, but the center of who I am, the seat of my mind, will, emotions, the core, the essence of who I am. I'll give you a new heart, and I'll put a spirit in you. That'll be the Holy Spirit. I'll remove your heart of stone. See, a stone heart is what I had. It didn't love God. It didn't obey God. It didn't desire God. It didn't want to be holy. It didn't want to be like Jesus, and it didn't want anything to do with Jesus. Not as God. A hard heart, a heart of stone. And I'll give you a heart of flesh. This is a new heart. It's not a perfect heart, but it's a heart that does love God, that does want to do good, that does want to grow, that does desire Jesus. Goes on to say, and I'll put my Spirit, the Holy Spirit, the same power that enabled the life of Jesus, now dwells in me through regenerating grace. And move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. In the New Testament, the language used for the new heart of regenerating grace is being born again. That you're born physically, you need to be born again spiritually. You're born with a hard heart, you need to be born again with a new heart. Now what this does, this absolutely transforms my whole life. I can't overstate how wonderful this is. And I can't explain to you to what degree this absolutely undermines and devastates religion. I hate religion. Here's what religion essentially says. God doesn't regenerate you and give you a new heart. What that means is your deepest desires are really to do evil. And so in an effort to avoid evil, you need to make a long list of rules and need to be very disciplined to live by the rules to keep you from sinning. That means that you're in constant conflict and you don't really have any joy. And what motivates you to live a holy life is not love, but fear. You're afraid that God will punish you. Well, Paul says in the New Testament that perfect love casts out fear because fear has to deal with punishment. Regenerating grace means I don't obey God because I'm afraid of punishment. I know that Jesus died in my place on the cross for my sins, and my punishment has already been paid. Now, if I do sin, there will be consequences in this life, but not that kind of eternal punishment. So why would I want to follow God? Why would I want to obey God? Why would I want to love God? Why? The regenerating grace of a new heart includes new desires. I love this. My heart, as a Christian, has very different desires than my heart had as a non-Christian. As a non-Christian, I want to live for my glory, not God's. I want to do what I want to do. I didn't want to do what the Bible said. I didn't want to go to Bible study. I didn't want to pray. I didn't want to love my enemies. I didn't want to forgive anyone. I could still remember being in college. I had a regenerated new heart as a brand new Christian, and one night I got invited to a drunken frat party with naked women and a Bible study. I had to choose, which one am I going to go to? And I remember sitting in my dorm room thinking about it, and I remember then as I was walking to the Bible study, thinking to myself, something has really changed. Right? I really want to go to the Bible study. Now, previous to a new heart, that would have not been my desire. Naked woman, Leviticus. Well, I don't even need to flip a coin. I know what I want to do. I meet Jesus, and all of a sudden it's like, I actually want to go to the Bible study more than anything. Now, what this doesn't mean is that you and I won't have temptation, or what the Bible would refer to as conflicted desire. Paul speaks of conflicted desires very frankly in Romans. He says, I don't do what I want to do. Sometimes I do exactly what I don't want to do. I'm totally confused. What am I going to do? He says, so I'm going to follow the Holy Spirit who gives me the desires of my heart. As a Christian, you will have conflicted desires, but here's the truth. Your will and God's will, if you have the regenerating grace of a new heart, your will and God's will, they're not different. Because God's will and your will are the same. Because your new heart has God's desires. Your new heart has God's law written on it, and your new heart has God's Spirit working through it. That means you need not feed your conflicted desires, you need to feed your deepest desires. If you're a Christian, your deepest desires will be for holiness and Jesus and obedience and God and that which is good. The result is that you can live a passionate life. See, religion doesn't have passion. In fact, in religion, passion is the problem. You can't do what you enjoy because that's wicked. No. The regenerating grace of a new heart says your deepest desires are God's desires, so be passionate for those desires. Replace an old affection with a new one, to use Jonathan Edwards' language. Replace an old sinful desire with a new holy desire. And your problem is not that you're passionate. The problem is you're not passionate enough. You need to be passionate for your deepest desires in your new heart. And if you follow your deepest desires of your new heart, you'll be doing God's will. God's will be your will. And here's the result. You'll be happy. I'm happy. I'm a happy guy. I really am. I have conflicted desires. There are days I don't feel like being, qualified to be a pastor and obeying God and reading my Bible and loving my wife and doing my stuff. But my deepest desires, I read my Bible, love my kids, be faithful to my wife, and be your pastor. Those are my deepest desires. The more I feed them, the stronger they get, and the more I obey them, the happier I become, because I'm doing what I'm made to do, and it feels right. How many of you know what this means? You've experienced regenerating grace, and you have new desires. And the more you pursue them, the happier you become, and the holier you become, because your passion is leading you toward the things of God. That's why I love regenerating grace. That's why I hate religion.